So welcome to the webinar, 5 Keys to Successful Food Transportation. This is a presentation by Matt Mason. Matt Mason is the co-founder and part of the leadership team at BM2 Freight Services. BM2 Freight is down in Northern Kentucky. They work with 5 Fortune 500 companies that move food. So these guys know what they're doing. Matt knows what he's doing. He's kind of a guru in this food supply chain space. So he's going to talk to us about the 5 keys to successful food transportation. My name is Joe Lynch, and I run the logistics of logistics, and I do some of these webinars with companies like Matt, with companies like BM2 and people like Matt. So without further delay, we'll hand it over to Matt, and you tell us a little bit about yourself, Matt.
Thank you, Joe. And I'd like to start off by thanking everybody for joining us today. I believe we're going to hold questions until the end. Is that correct, Joe? And
Yes.
Use the chat feature to type those in. So
Yep.
I guess if something pops up while you guys are listening in, just jot down a note, and then at the end we'll open it up for questions. As Joe said, my name is Matt Mason. I'm one of the co-founders here at BM2 Freight Services, a Kentucky-based logistics solutions provider. Our team here specializes in the food transportation and cold chain distribution. We currently service food retailers, distributors, producers, and wholesalers, including 5 companies in the Fortune 500, as Joe alluded to. The webinar today is going to be focusing in on the 5 keys to successful food transportation. So let's get into it. The first key and the first element we're going to talk about this afternoon is food safety and the FSMA. As you're probably aware, the FSMA law came into effect earlier this year and has brought about some changes in the transportation of food. And it has also raised the bar for shippers, carriers, and 3PLs alike. There are additional requirements for information exchange. We like to call them best practices that pertain to the FSMA, and there's 3 or 4 bullet points that are really key in our eyes. The first one being having knowledge of prior load information. For example, if you're going to pick up a load of fresh produce on a load, they need to know what was on your truck before that. You're mixing in a load of a hazardous material and then going in and picking up a load of food is probably not the best practice. So you need to be able to document that and keep track of that and be able to share that information with everybody. The ability to monitor temperature throughout and during and after transport. So you need to be able to have a downloadable reefer unit to be able to share that information with the powers that be. The third one is carrier vetting. You need to be on top of compliance as far as vetting out your carriers. Food companies are typically very careful about food safety internally, and they're somewhat hands-off when it comes to safe food transport. That was probably the precipice of the FSMA. They have all their regulations in place when the stuff is at their facility, and it was kind of hands-off once it hit the road. So these new best practices make it very important for carriers to be aware and understand the new processes and procedures for hauling food. Can you go on to the next slide, Joe?
Yep, I thought I did, so you can't see it.
Oh, no, you're right. It was there. I'm sorry. Since most big food shippers will need to utilize trucks for multiple carriers, 3PL should be used to drive compliance. A good 3PL is your food transportation compliance manager. What I mean by that is that when you're a food shipper or a manufacturer, you do what you do well, which is manufacture food and get it out the door to service your customers. That's your core business. Taking advantage of using a 3PL that their expertise is hauling and shipping fresh and frozen food can free up your organization to continue to focus on what you do best.
Hey, Matt, this is Joe. One thing I've noticed is, over the last year, I've done some food safety webinars with you guys. And one of the things that I thought it was interesting is you sometimes talk to shippers who say, oh, this food safety thing is too important, we're going to bring it in-house. And what they find out oftentimes is we're not used to managing a dozen carriers. And we're also not, it's not just the FSMA, it's all the stuff that comes. And so I think when they realize they don't have the resources and the people and the knowledge to manage that piece. Compliance is no picnic, as you know.
Right. That's exactly right, Joe. And that's, when we talk to a lot of shippers, we're getting the feedback we're getting is exactly that. It's a difficult task to manage 10, 15, 20 different trucking companies in order to make sure they do everything the way that that particular shipper needs them to be done. So hiring out a 3PL that's what they do. That's their bread and butter. It seems to be a win-win for both parties.
Exactly.
Moving on, FSMA compliance and food safety is more than just a process and rules. It's a culture. To ensure FSMA compliance, shippers should use 3PLs and carriers that specialize in food transport, as we just were talking about. Again, it's a full-time, it's a big, cumbersome task to be able to manage multiple carriers and make sure everything's done the way that your organization needs them done. Moving on to key number 2, which is developing and delivering customized transportation solutions. This all begins with customer requirements. Many food shippers need more than an off-the-shelf solution to meet their customers' requirements. A good 3PL should tailor their services to meet each individual customer's needs. Every customer is different, every shipper is different, everybody has different processes, different procedures, and different needs that need to be met. When a customized solution is needed, the key is to understand what exactly the customer's requirements are through an in-depth and detailed discovery meeting. It is important to become a trusted advisor and or consultant with those customers to make sure their needs are met and nothing gets missed, because it is very important now that with the new regulations in place, as a carrier or a 3PL, there's skin in the game on our end as well. If something does go bad with an order. A 3PL should also incorporate transportation and logistics best practices into the solution. That's referring back to the first bullet point I talked about with having the prior load info, truck washout, information exchange. Those are the key talking points or the key bullet points that we're going to continue to bring up throughout the webinar here. Designing a customized solution. After the customer's requirements are fully understood, the 3PL must design and develop a customized solution that meets those needs, as I just talked about, of all the internal and external customers. We feel that a customer review of the process and the solution ensure buy-in and support from all parties. You have to make sure you've got buy-in from, the shipper, the consignee, the buyer, everybody, all points. Customized solutions may include process documentation, TMS, temp sensors, reporting, KPIs, communication, specialized carriers, consolidation, customer service, auditing, billing, etc. Again, every customer is going to have different needs, and it's important to be able to understand and provide solutions to those needs on an individual basis.
Hey, Matt, this is Joe. One thing that I know we've talked about in the past is the importance for a shipper to be strategic when you start working with a 3PL, because if you're going to work with a whole bunch of different carriers and a lot of 3PLs, and you kind of don't commit to anybody, then nobody designs a customized solution for you. And then you stay in that transactional space where you don't save that extra dollar. If you're going to get all these cool things, this customized solution that, BM2 and other companies like them provide, you have to commit. It's not just saying, I'm just going to date around and see who I can work with. That's all going to stay very transactional, and you're not going to save any money in the long run.
Right. And what you find out happens a lot is when you do become, when an organization hires on a 3PL to manage their whole process, it's another set of eyes and another expertise, an area of expertise where they can possibly see an angle that the shipper or they've never even thought of, and you can have some value and some savings there as well. Key number 3 is operational excellence, and this is going to be broken down into 3 important pieces. The first one is going to be technology. When we talk about technology as a 3PL, your TMS system is the lifeblood of your organization. Visibility and track and trace. An example of this would be some shippers need to have 24-hour access to monitor their freight from the time it leaves their dock to the time it hits the end user, the receiver. So having a TMS that is capable of letting them log in and check it out on their own without having to constantly make phone calls and emails and et cetera is really an important part of being a 3PL. Another big thing is having a customized TMS that enables and enforces the FSMA compliance. Some things, again, the 3 bullet points are the prior cargo haul, the constant temp monitoring, and the washout of the truck. One of the things we've done personally over here at BM2 is we're customizing our in-house TMS to make those parts of every load, every person that dispatches a truck that touches it needs to follow those procedures, and they have to do it in order to go on to the next step in our TMS system, which will help ensure compliance across the board. Some other technological things would be KPIs, generating reports and such to share with the shippers, EDI, electronic invoicing, system integration. These are just a few of many, many, many different customizations that a TMS can offer, and again, each situation can bring about different things, so you have to be able to be agile in that regard. The next thing with technology is sensors, temperature control. There's tools now that allow you to share that temperature data in real time in 10-minute increments via email with the shipper, the dispatcher, the driver, so everybody has knowledge of what's going on with the temp of the trailer when it's en route. And then obviously there's some stuff out there, some products, MacroPoint and GPS in the trucks that's been around for a little while. The second element when we're talking about operational excellence is carrier management. 3PLs need to have a vast carrier network and qualification process in place, good quality onboarding and vetting, continuing compliance. You need to make sure you're up to date with insurance monitoring, everybody's, the FMCSA, your authority and your insurance is active, and watchdog sites to make sure carriers are up to speed. Carrier and driver scorecards are a big thing. Every load you can keep track of each individual driver and score how they did, and also how the carrier did, to make sure you're putting the correct, the good carriers, keep doing business with the right carriers. KPIs for carrier management would, some of the things you can measure there would be fallout percentage, on-time delivery, OS&D, and repeat usage. Obviously, the more often you can use the same carriers, there's more synergy there between you, the shipper, and everybody. So it moves flawlessly when you start using the same carriers over and over again. Continuing on with carrier management is performance and service levels. These are some of the same things here, but this is in-house almost. As a 3PL, you can measure your on-time performance, your cost per mile, per pound, or per unit. And when we talk about that, as a 3PL, you need to understand how your shipper, the metrics they use to measure themselves. It could be cost per mile, it could be per pound, or whatever it is that they do it. You need to understand their language so you can get on the same page with them in order to help them out. Damages, obviously, you don't want to show up with damaged product. Billing accuracy to cut out any unnecessary extra work for anybody, and customer specific metrics, which I kind of mentioned earlier.
So Matt, do you guys share some of this information with your customers, or is this just internal?
With our customers. So what we like to do is we'll have, we try to have quarterly reviews with them to go over trends, see if we can, see if they're happy with how things are going, see if we're catching anything, if we're missing anything, things like that.
Excellent.
On to the third element of operational excellence, and that's going to be customer service. And as a 3PL, it's important to have excellent customer service, obviously, and then having a dedicated headcount to the accounts really helps things out. Dedicated headcount ensures customers' needs are understood and met. So, an example of that, what we do here at BM2 Freight is we segment it out into two different sections. We'll have a carrier sales lead and an account management lead. A carrier sales lead, they're responsible for the day-to-day customer service, such as building and maintaining carrier relationships. That's their sole focus, so they can hone in on that and do that to the best of their ability. And then on the account management side, they're responsible for commercial issues and customer satisfaction. They make sure the customer's needs are met, and they put out any fires, and they communicate all issues and concerns or problems with the customer. Contact list and escalation matrix, I'll touch on that a little bit later. And it's important as a 3PL to cross-train and back up team members who are knowledgeable of the account. A lot of times you'll run into the account rep might be out of town, and then nobody, the guy that's filling in, the guy or gal that's filling in for them they might not understand what that specific customer's needs are. So a way around that is to design a customer playbook for them. So they know what exactly needs to be done, how it needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and the way it should be done. And we know you need to do it that way every time.
Yeah. Matt, if I could just add one thing to this is, when you talk about operational excellence, this is something that you don't hear every 3PL talk about. A lot of these become kind of boiler room operations where the guys you're talking to and the guys who sell to you are, inexperienced in operations, and their focus is just making the next sale, and it's very transactional. The kind of stuff you talk about here is very strategic, and it comes with that customized solution, which I think is important, whichever 3PL you're going to hire.
Yeah, that's a good point. You always want to strive to be more than just the one-off guy that's looking out for the next sale. You want to become effectively an arm, a branch of that shipper, so you can have a long-term relationship, and it's a two-way street there.
Yeah, you become an extension of the supply chain group.
That's right. That's exactly right. Continuing on with the operational excellence, there's some KPIs and some reporting that can be done. A highly effective 3PL will use KPIs to monitor their performance. Here's a couple of examples that you can measure. Cost. Obviously, cost is a big thing for everyone. On-time performance, billing accuracy, damage and freight claims, process compliance, customer-specific requirements, and customer service. So, typically you'll find a shipper or customer will have 2 or 3 needs that are more important to them than others. So that's part of the 3PL's job, is to uncover those needs and see exactly how they like them met, and then form a plan to help them apply those. The best 3PLs have a well-defined process to ensure maximum effectiveness and efficiency. As I said earlier, processes enable cross-training. Process is the first step in continuous improvement. These should be shared with the internal team, logistics partners, and clients. You asked earlier, Joe, about that, sitting down on a quarterly basis and sharing those with not only the 3PL team, but the shipper or customer as well, to make sure that everything's running as smoothly as it possibly can be. And software, we feel like software drives process compliance.
Excellent.
Key number 4 is food specialization and experience. When we talk about food specialization and experience, the food supply chain supports 3 main customer segments: restaurants, grocery stores, and producers and farmers, where you can hear them referred to as grower shippers. When selecting a 3PL partner, food shippers should look for a 3PL who have similar customers. The more familiar a 3PL is with a particular shipper or their receiver or both, and how their best practices are put in place, the better positioned they are to meet that particular customer's needs. So as a 3PL, you don't want to, if you're shipping lettuce out of California, you don't want to call a guy that specializes in steel out of Detroit, Michigan. You want to make sure they're familiar with how your receivers like to do work, and how your processes work. Food transportation is much more demanding and exacting than standard shipping.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, if I could just add one thing. The big box stores like Walmart, Sam's, Meijer, in the grocery stores, you're always better off finding somebody who's already delivering to those. And I know you guys do a lot of that kind of work, but you're better off doing it that way just because they've got that expertise already available. And if you want to train a carrier and a new 3PL in that, it's going to be a long, painful process.
Yeah, it really is, and it's very important. And it's a Walmart, for example, they're extremely strict on the window you have to deliver their product, and you've got a 1 hour window on the day of your appointment. And if you miss it, it sets you back a day, and then they grade their customers on that. So it's important to understand that as the 3PL to know that you need to build in a little cushion there. So
yeah.
That
and when you're talking food, it's perishable. That's
right.
So you lose a day. That's losing quite a bit. Nobody wants to eat old food.
That's exactly right, and that goes into the next bullet point. The biggest concern with food transport is the perishableness of it and the timing. So every day is crucial. Every hour, for that matter, is crucial. So make sure you're using a 3PL that specializes in that. Food safety concerns and tampering. Again, the FSMA best practices that we touched on before. Temperature control, that's an obvious one. Sanitary standards and prior load information, that kind of goes up into the FSMA thing. Seasonality and capacity. As a 3PL, it's important to understand, or as a carrier in general, it's important to understand the seasonality and how that affects the marketplace. It drives rate, it drives capacity, and using a 3PL that has a good grasp on that gives you a leg up, so you're not stuck behind the 8 ball, so to speak, when you have a hot load going out, or you have a big week, a big push of orders going out. Also, the last bullet point there is documentation. Again, that's the FSMA. You have to document everything and be able to share that data with everyone. Education and affiliations. As a 3PL, it's important to get out there and stay engaged and go to and be a part of the associations to see what's new, see what's coming down the pike. Get involved with, if you're in the produce, the PMA, United Fresh, the TIA, the cold chain supply. If you're going to do it, you need to stay out there and be engaged with all those associations. Then the last bullet point is operational crisis management. What I mean by that is it says their ability to save loads. This is more specific to produce because it is very perishable. If a truck breaks down or something, you need to have, all hands on deck, a process in place to make sure that gets there as soon as it possibly can. You can't wait around for the mechanic to come out in 5 hours and give a diagnosis on the truck, and then you've lost a whole day. It's having processes in place to ensure everything is done to get that perishable product to the receiver as fast as possible.
Hey, Matt, before you jump off this one, I've noticed with, you mentioned the education and affiliations, there's a lot of new Fed regs coming down the pike. And, not only do you have to be aware of them, you have to understand, what adjustments you need to make. And what, I've observed is the companies that aren't, getting out there, as you said, often are behind and being reactive to things like Food Safety Modernization Act or hours of service or electronic logging. and it's going to hit their shippers. So, you know, to your point, when you're looking for a 3PL, you want to work with one that is part of the community and keeping up to date.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Joe. Just to add on there, I mean, if you're a shipper and you're using a carrier or a 3PL that's unaware of the, you know, that's not up to date with what's coming with the LD or the FSMA or anything, you're exposing yourself to possible, you know, troubles down the road. So it's important to partner up with people that are out in front of things. Our last key number 5 is going to be culture and people. The right culture, as we touched on it earlier, to be successful in food transportation, you must develop the right culture. Making food safety best practices part of your processes and procedures is ingraining that into the company's culture. That's what I'm meaning by that. And, you know, that starts with the leadership team being hands-on and visible. Integrity. The 3PL has to do things the right way, and you have to do them that way every time. There's no shortcuts. Ownership of problems. There's so many moving parts on every single load. Attention to detail is paramount, and you can't transfer the blame. You have to own it if something does go wrong, so the problem can be solved. Being proactive. You have to be proactive instead of reactive. That's a huge thing in the perishable world. Responsiveness, open communication, respond quickly. That's a given in the transportation business. Being flexible, people oriented, and risk adverse. The right people. As a 3PL, your processes for hiring, training, and retaining the best talent have to be constantly monitored and looked at. You know, compensation and merit-based advancement, that's something that's been a successful thing for us over the years, and that in turn will help produce low turnover. Having a solid organizational structure, clearly defined roles and responsibilities so everybody can be accountable for what their roles and duties are. And the last bullet point, we've already talked about that. You mentioned it, Joe, when you asked about the boiler room operations, and it's, you know, it's having people that have a vested interest in not only themselves but as the, you know, the whole team, the whole organization. What's you know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and you don't want people that are just in it for themselves. They need to have everybody's best interests in mind.
Yep, Matt, we've discussed this before in other webinars, but, you know, I noticed, you know, a lot of big 3PLs, and I'm not, you know, being critical of the way they run their business. I guess I am being critical. They hire a lot of young salespeople, make a million phone calls, and a lot of times those guys are remote, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm part of this billion-dollar organization with all these capabilities," and they're very far removed from it. They're working from their basement, and they've never visited that facility. And they don't know about the operation, so they're just very focused on the next sale, not necessarily on how the operations work and best practices.
Yeah, that ties back. That's a good point. It ties back into having it be a part of the culture. You know, if you are sitting out in your basement, out in you know, wherever you are in Montana, and you're not in the daily, you know, interacting daily with your coworkers, and you don't have, the only person you're worried about is yourself. So being a part of a culture that cares about it, and that's what you do every day, that's really a big thing.
So I think that's it. Matt, if you got some time, you got time for some questions?
I have some time. Yeah.
So hang on just a sec. Anybody have any questions, comments? Use this chat feature. So Carissa, Doug, Lori, anybody? Matt? Please have at it. By the way, I'm just curious, are you guys You guys are you shippers, or are you guys in the 3PL freight broker side? I know what Doug is. I know what. Consultant to shippers, Carissa. Nice. Doug, I know what you do. You fix carriers. But Lori, Matt, what are you guys up to? Shippers, carriers, 3PLs. Okay, a little of both. There's a question here from Matt. How have you handled customers who? Oh, sorry, that popped away. We'll go back to the attendee chat here. So, how have you handled customers who want to ship produce via vented van? Do you still assist, or do you avoid? Good question, Matt.
That is a good question. We do a lot on vented vans. One of the biggest things you need to do is get it in writing up front that shipper and that receiver is okay with that product being shipped on a vented van. A lot, an example of that is a lot of watermelons get shipped on vented vans, depending on the time of the year. You don't want to ship them in the middle of July, but in the springtime when it's not nearly as hot out, it's okay to do that. So,
Mac, why don't you touch on what is a vented van for those in the webinar who don't know? Not everyone's got that knowledge.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So most of your produce is shipped on a refrigerated unit. We put it reefer for short, and then a vented van. It's a box van, and it's very simple. They just cut vents in the front and the back of the van vent covers, and just to allow some air circulation to run through, so it's not back there cooking. So it gives it a little bit of airflow as the truck is going. But back to Matt's question. Absolutely, onions and potatoes, you can ship those on vented vans as well. You don't steer away from it. Just make sure you get the go ahead to do that in writing up front before you load anything on a truck.
Okay, good question, good answer. Hey, there's another question here from Lori. Lori says, I'm a carrier, so from a broker perspective, what is being done to push back on the shippers and receivers in order to cut down on the 5 or 6 hour unload time? If an hour is important as far as perishable goes, what about the way these distribution centers are run? Yeah, it's an ongoing problem. Good question, Lori.
That's a great question, Lori. That's something that we constantly work with our shippers on, and it's almost when I mentioned, or when we talked about becoming a consultant and advisor to them, that's something that we'll bring up in a quarterly review with them. And that drives down cost. Obviously, if your truck's sitting there for 5 or 6 hours, that's hours of service, so you lose half a day. So, and then your product's not going to get there for an additional day. There's not really one. I wish I had the answer to it, but it's communicating with your shipper about that, and sitting down with them and trying to figure out the best way to tackle it, because every shipper operates differently, obviously, right?
Yeah, Lori, when do you guys start getting paid on detention? I'm just curious. Lori's answer was some for 2 hours, some for 3. So yeah, it's still painful because, to Matt's point, you're losing that hours of service.
Did I answer that okay for you, Lori? Have you noticed?
Also, we get another.
Have you noticed increased claim activity after SFMA implementation? Customers may be a little more cautious or overly cautious. That's another good question, Matt. We haven't here at BM2. No, I can't say that we have, but it's been, it's only been a few months, so I don't know if it's, if that's a big enough, period to be able to say one way or the other if it has.
And I'm not saying this to be nice here, Matt, but you guys have also been kind of working with very professional, shippers and to very big companies. So in a lot of ways, I think a lot of them were kind of already exceeding FSMA requirements prior to the law or the act. I'm sorry. Oh, Lori's got a follow up here, and she says, when she's talking about regarding the detention fees, it's $25 to $35 an hour, and we still have to keep the reefer cold, and the financial impact to the shipper receiver isn't enough for them to become more efficient. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and you got to keep a driver paid, and it's a little painful. You need more in detention. Make them feel it.
I feel your pain there, Lori.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? So if you guys have any, thank you, Lori. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
If you guys have any other questions or comments, or just want to connect, here's Matt's information. He's mmason at bm2freight.com. Again, Matt does these webinars as a way to reach out to, potential customers, carriers, just the community. And this is part of their commitment to educating themselves and the rest of the shipping and trucking community. So please reach out. And if you have any questions, of course, you can call them also at 859-308-5100. Matt, you want to add anything else? Final comments, unless there's a question?
Just thank you, everybody, for your participation in the good questions, and hopefully you guys are able to take something away from it that can benefit you. And thank you, Joe.
Excellent job, Matt, as usual. You're a freight guru. Have a good one, guys.
You too. See you, Joe.
Yep. And by the way, guys, we make this, we recorded this, so if you want a copy, thank you, Carissa. Thank you, Lori. If you want a copy or a recording of this, we'll get that for you. So let us know. Thank you so much. Guys, have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Joe.